Yours should be working, yeah.
If I stand here, can you hear me like that? Like that? Is that good? Okay. I have this. Hi, everybody. I'm grateful to be here tonight. Shelley sends her apologies. She's doing an inclusive design process tonight with the community, so she couldn't be here. Living the dream. So urban arts architecture is as Ashley pointed out, is a partnership of Shelley and myself. In 2006, we decided, even though we'd probably been collaborating together for a period of about 6 years on individual projects, 2006 we decided that the world was ready for a two-woman-led firm. And we've been growing the firm actively, and it's gone from being 3 people to 11 or 12, depending on the day. We have some of our urbanites here. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, sorry, that's me. So from the start, our aspiration has been to be a community-based practice. Pictured here is the Queensboro Community Center project, and we really do believe that our aim is to create meaningful community places and experiences through the art of architecture. And a community place can happen in an academic setting, it can happen in a housing development, it can happen on the street. But really, getting at the root of community is at our core purpose. And actually, this diagram, somewhat augmented by us, but was provided to us through Gil Kelly the other day when he was talking about launching the citywide plan. And what was revolutionary to me, or revelatory about this diagram, is that the planning department has put people at the center, which, you know, it seems like natural, right? But in fact, it's revelatory. And we just changed, you know, urban, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Where is that little thing? Okay, there, we changed urban form for culture, because that's really what, the 4 petals of what drives urban arts considerations when we work with people are, you know, looking at the economics, the environment, and social sustainability. But really that culture plays such a key part of that, and really getting to the root of what culture is in the work drives the inspiration and the quality of the work. So, you know, our process is really rooted in collaboration. We collaborate in the office, we collaborate with our consultants, we collaborate with our client group, and we collaborate with our stakeholders. But, you know, above all, architecture is a team sport. This is our team, and we make sure that we nourish the, you know, healthy community relationships within the firm, whether it's community lunch club started by Megan here, or, you know, our annual boating trip and free-for-all, and other things that we do to try to really nourish our relationship together. We charrette in the office together. We have an open studio concept, and that is core to us, we believe, in delivering quality work. And we really do believe that success is achieved through the alignment of goals and values in any project. So we call that community vision. And it's one thing to sort of say that, but how do you actually get at that information, that you can actually rely upon it to build the process for the project, the program for the project, the concepts. And, you know, paddling and getting everybody paddling in the same direction is kind of the key message. So if you can do this successfully, the chances of having success throughout the project, because if anytime you have issues, you can come back and remind people about why you're doing, what the core values are. And I think this is a step that's often missed in architecture. We need to do more of this in our society to create alignment. And I know that that's something that the planning department's actually starting to wake up to, that we need to create alignment on values in the city. Did I say everything I wanted to say there? So, you know, we have developed a whole bunch of ways that we get at, you know, the creating a community vision or understanding the goals and values of a project. And, you know, whether that's through gaming and precedent studies, community conversations, brainstorming, role-playing. We have a whole bunch of, like a little tickle trunk of techniques. And what we found is when we go out to community, if we are off base in our understanding, and that happens, you make an assumption about what's going to work. You just have to be really nimble to kind of shift gears and say, ooh, like sit down with the client group and figure out how to shift things and better go forward. So sometimes there's a bit of a reset in that process. But I think the key words I want to point out here is we work in and with community. We don't work for community, we're working with community, and we go out and in the community, meet people where they're at, and really understand where they're coming from. So another key kind of aspect of our practice is to innovate as a way of working. And this project, it's actually a project that Shelley's been spearheading. It highlights the importance of research in our work, and a predecessor project of this was a project we did with the Council of Forest Industries to research how we can use wood more in our society, in our economy, I should say, and our work resulted in the building code being changed to 6 stories being allowed to be built in wood. So not bad for a couple of girls. They were going to give us 15 minutes at Kofi to kind of present to them, and 2.5 hours later we had a major grant to go out and collaborate with decision makers, authorities having jurisdiction, engineers, marketers, wood suppliers across the nation. So continuing to innovate, this project is a project we're working on right now, and we're working to incorporate a systems-based approach using mass timber in multifamily housing coupled with high-performance envelopes to really meet the Passive House standards and to try to create a way of being able to deliver high-quality housing within a kind of stick frame budget and predictability and all of those other things that go with that. So that's something super. So continuing on the innovating as a way of working subject, our Radium Hot Springs Community Hall, which was completed last summer, is really truly beloved by the community. It's a hall and library combined facility. And this is the opening celebration. The community is extraordinarily attached for it because this building has been built by and for the community. So what we did was a kind of designed a process of engagement and design that both worked with the wood stakeholders in the valley and the community, which resulted in economic and social stimulus. So I'm just going to tell you the story of Radium, which is like pretty significant. We had one meeting with kind of over the phone actually with the client group, and then when we first rocked up in Radium, before we met with the community, we met with all the people in the valley who worked in wood, because the community had said we want to build a wood building. So we wanted to understand what did that mean, what were they capable of doing in the Columbia Valley. So this is right up against the Rockies. They are semi-remote from other places. You can't get there from Calgary, but they have a huge wood industry in the valley. So we put an ad in the newspaper, and people rocked up, and it was an incredibly collaborative, interesting meeting, and it wasn't competitive. Everybody sort of shared what they were capable of doing. And when we went out to meet with the community and talk to them about what was capable of being delivered, we were able to speak with authority that we had these groups of people who were prepared to step up. So the other part of this process was we have a kind of, every project we work on is kind of what we call this spiral that loops in on itself. So starting out with visioning, really broad, wide, anything goes, thinking about everything, and all of these dots are kind of meetings, and they're sort of the scale of the kind of meetings you have. So we're talking about, we met with the wood industry, and then we had a vision workshop with the community. We did some design shredding. We had public open houses, and as we move in through the phases of work, the layers of consideration or the kind of scope of consideration gets tighter, and we find that this is kind of this. Thinking about our work in this kind of drilling down spiral is really something that helps us be conscious about remembering to loop back with all of the stakeholders through the process, remembering to kind of tell people where we've gotten to and get further feedback, and just kind of, again, taking that buy-in that you get through the vision workshop and things like that, and making sure that you're getting it, the design detailing, and that you're getting it when you're going to construction documents. So this is just some images of our Radium experience, our public open houses, and some of the design workshops we have with the community, generated design. We always, and we, this is like a result of a precedent study. We give people postcards and they take what they like from it and make their own collage of what their vision for the ultimate project is. And these are all just tools to get at ways of helping people talk about maybe people who don't know about design or architecture, but they know how that, what their sort of values and goals are. How do we kind of get at that? So this building sits in a central park in the center of the city, in the center of the valley, and it is basically an armature to support activation of the park and to be a community hall and a library. So this is a giant bowl. Like it steps down about 3 stories here from this to there. But the key message is that this is the 100-mile building. All of the wood was sourced within 100 miles of the facility, and it's a wood structure. So we have DLT. This is the first DLT project in Canada, not the Structurlam factory out the valley, or Structurecraft. Is it Structurecraft? Structurecraft, yeah. The new DLT plant that's been built at the valley. No, this was first. And it was built by a guy who knew about DLT, and he was really excited about it, and he got some grants to do some research and set this all up and did it out of his shop in the Columbia Valley. It's locally sourced glue-lams. The charred wood cladding was actually done by a community member. He invented a little auger to manage the gradient of the charring. So there's a huge amount of investment of personal energy into this building, just from the construction level. So, and you can see here the DLT panels being craned into place. I think the roof went in less than the whole kind of structure went in on kind of less than a week or so. Very quick, went up very quickly. This is a view from the inside of the hall, looking out to the park, and how important the connections to landscape are. One of the key things about this project is the hall is it's not a gym. It's actually a place for people to meet and do programming and special events. And they are now booked like till 2021 for every available moment that you could actually have an event, because a lot of people are from the Columbia Valley and they want to come back and have family reunions and that kind of thing. So it's been a raging success economically for them, because the space, while it's kind of economic, it was economically built, it also we put a lot of attention into how could you, without spending more money, make it a really attractive, pleasant space to be. There's more pictures of the hall, and there's a stage, and that gets divided off so that you can have that as a program area. So there's the DLT panels, a gap between for all the services, lights, etc., and the glue lamps, sort of simple structure. And again, built with local labor. The site superintendent was a friend of, was a community member, and the actual project manager was actually the building inspector. So a little bit, self-policed, but it was a very tight little project. And there's a picture of the library, and just, I think what I wanted to say about this image was, that this is a really, really, careful wood details that were passionately crafted. The environmental impact of this project is extremely positive, building in wood, and not only because it was sourced locally, but all of the carbon sequestered, etc. So this building, which is kind of an aggregation of very simple agrarian forms that are found in the valley, simple sheds, really, takes, special care where there's sort of details that you normally would, like how do we sort of sort this out? Well, we'll actually take that as an opportunity to do something that just lends some joy. And the project is truly appreciated by all. So I don't know if you guys know about Radium, but these guys run the town. There's, I think, 137 of them. They run wild. They're not allowed to do anything to them. And they eat everything. So this is our Schwahamel multiplexer. It's like a community hall slash gymnasium with a health center and administration facility for community. Shwahamo means where the river widens. They're out just this side of Hope. And the project is under construction. We're just out there today. And this is sort of another way that projects can actually be huge economic drivers. So it's very common these days for First Nations communities to have community members work as, you do construction training and work as members of the construction team or construction labor and skill. But what's happened on this project is the nation has actually put forward their own development corp to actually build this building, which took a lot of negotiating with our funding partners because they're somewhat untried. They've built a few single-family homes, but this is a big deal. They've partnered with a group outside. But this will drive their ability to go out to other communities and provide buildings. It's creating a huge learning opportunity and training opportunity at that management level to be, economically empowered. So it's been really a pleasure to work with this community. So what does I want to say about that? So some key principles of how this building came to be from a formal perspective is to connect to the land and the place. So views of the mountains and views of the landscape, and also how the building's oriented, and it's kind of an idea about flowing. The parts are sort of joined around a very central space that just flows in and out of the landscape. And these principles and values are really set by the community. They're a community that's really struggling to reconnect to their culture because they have been in contact for 150 years. And so a lot of people don't even really have any language or knowledge of traditional culture, but it's really a desire. So this project is really also a way of the community to help teach itself about where their traditions come from. So, respecting the culture through using traditional forms, both the pit house, which is an elder's lounge, and a longhouse form, which is the main hall, but also they're acknowledging their unique form of government, which is called a siam, which means there is no elected chief or anything like that. Each family puts forward a family member, and they make decisions collaboratively on a consensus basis for the good of the community. So this is a project that's another result of very intensive community collaboration. This is the Plickett Community Hall and Health Center up in Lillooet. We went back for many iterations based on different funding opportunities the community had, and the building evolved to be ultimately a community hall and health center and administration facility. This is pretty typical of the kind of program that we would do for a First Nation, where it is their only or major community or public facility. And this building is really grounded in the traditional wisdom of the Upper Schlafling people. So the project is really set up to foster cross-pollination in the community. So there's the lobby is a place to kind of meet and run into people, and it's one of those things where, we built this very nice lobby, and we thought it's going to be a great place to have art openings, and kind of brought our kind of cityfied idea about how that can be. Well, they went out to the brick and bought a whole bunch of really comfortable furniture, filled up the lobby, and that's where everybody in the community spends their time. So if you go and hang out on that couch, you will see everyone in the community in a given day. So it's not how we planned it, but it works better than we could have imagined. And it's a place to learn, to gather, and to heal. So just to explain the story about the traditional wisdom, these people for over 10,000 years have been living in pit dwellings. It's a hugely cold, bitter cold winds in the winter, and hot, 30 to 40 degrees in the summer, dry. So they live in their traditional dwellings were pit houses, but also summer arbors so that they could be sheltered from the sun on the edges of the river when they were fishing and out gathering from the land. So the project was an attempt to work with the ecosystems to really drive down our need for mechanical systems. And again, it's 30 to 40 degrees in the summertime. And but they have a huge amount of wind on the site. So There's these big intakes at the end of the building, and the wind comes in and helps cool the building through displacement ventilation. You can, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. See, I just can't really drive myself. Okay. This is a tricky little thing. Again, using the pit house wisdom, which is to put the building into the ground and use the natural insulation qualities of the ground, the sheltering qualities of that. But also it allowed us to minimize the mass of this NBA-sized gym in this community that's a teeny tiny, made up of teeny tiny little houses. This project's been a raging success. They probably have this space booked, and this is in Lillooet, I would say 5 days out of 7 minimum, where there's something like major activity going on here, whether it's a health conference or Turtle Island. They host a festival where there's over 1,200 people come and gather here. They feed 1,200 people out of the gym, and they're just extraordinary people. So it's all about the kitchen. It's all about the kitchen. Do I want to say anything more about that? So it really just tells the story of the nation's relationship with the land. Oh, that's the other thing. So this project also talks about how important it is to actually work with an acoustic engineer, which we did not on this project. And because it's curved in plan and curved in section in both ways, it's like the Pantheon. You can stand at the middle and stand at the outside edge and whisper, and you can hear each other, so it's really tough acoustically. I mean, it's really, really good for certain things, but it makes it hard for us oral sharing. And so that's an ongoing kind of story. But these are discoveries you have. Very quickly go through this. The Heb Physics Theater, and this is just another way that we tell stories in our projects. So this is a redo of the Heb Physics lecture hall and lobby and support spaces. And the Heb is so it's a physics lecture theater and education facility. And so we were doing two things: the formal lecture hall refurbishment, but also the creation of social glue spaces, like turning the lobby into a place that people could hang out and interact and do kind of informal learning. So this is a kind of a painted black backlit glass. Actually, you can write on in a kind of a digital screen, and bean bags, and people are always sleeping here, and But the main story here is that we thought, physics. This is like that's like atoms and kind of George Jetson, and we did this beautiful screen design. This is to fix the acoustics. This is these perforated screens. Beautiful screen design of these atom forms, and they were just so beautiful. And we just showed them to the client, and they're like, "That's the 1950s. Like, that's not us. We're all about electrical fields, and this is what." So we had to understand what it is they were, where they're coming from, and then working with the same kind of general idea transformed it completely. So again, you have your first best guess, and always the client has just so much wisdom about what's really happening. So Engineering Student Center. So we worked with the engineering students in a really didactic process. They were our client, not the university. UBC Properties Trust was the project manager, but the client who was paying the bills was the engineering students. So we devised a process where they could be fully engaged in the design of the project, and then that's to the extent of coming to IDP meetings and being able to ask questions of our consulting engineers. And then we also did a lot of engagement with them to learn how they wanted to, what was the new paradigm for the engineers. And really what they decided was it's engineers without borders, rather than engineers with Lady Godiva or whatever else they used to get up to, and Volkswagens off the Lionsgate Bridge. But really, they really wanted to explore a very open, inclusive, progressive, global perspective in their culture, and this building is an opportunity for them to express that. So we worked with them for almost 6 years because there's funding stages at UBC that we had to go through, and in that 6 years our budget did not increase. We delivered on time and on budget. So one of the things that we set up on this project was to kind of develop a scenario-based series of functional diagrams and programming diagrams to help ourselves, but also the client to understand what their true space needs were. So this is actually just something we did for the gathering spaces in the for the building and for the outdoor spaces, to really have them understand how much space they really needed, because they came to us and they said, well, we need a space for 400 people. Well, how many times a year, this is a whole year, you do it once, and it's at Halloween. Like, maybe there's a way that you can do that differently, where we use outside a little bit, and, you know, we don't need to build a building for, you know, for one day of the year. But we can, but sure, 200 people really needs to be accommodated on a regular basis. And so again, it's like, you know, how do you communicate with your client in a way that they can make good decisions with you about the direction of a project? So this is structural approach. This is a nail lam building. So nail lam timber roof and second floor, which is here. So roof and second floor. Trusses, and the trusses are, you might go, oh, well, those look a little kind of old-fashioned. Well, they were deliberately old-fashioned. The engineers wanted something that spoke to their history of being engineers. So we had this very, very fancy Paul Fast designed truss. It was gorgeous, super futuristic looking, and they're like, no, we want something robust and that looks like a truss. So the main thing about this is that we created on the ground floor a columnless space to really support like flexibility and huge amount of gathering and not to impinge on the functionality of the space. And so some of the concepts here are you know, raw, open, flexible space, and cooked. These are all the support spaces, things that are tight. And this is all stick frame, clad in brick, and this is sort of basically wood, nail lam, you know, glue lam, and glass. And ultimately, the building had a key aspiration to, like, look at me, engineering prowess, and to really show off that engineers do make the world a better place. So there was a lot of kind of engineering, like pushing things to the limit. And there's formulas through the building and things that, you know, that are all about the engineers' culture and their contribution to our built world. So it's the trusses going in, and the key thing also is this little pavilion, which is 8,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, sits at the heart of the engineering precinct. So it's there's a precinct and there's a kind of courtyard, and it sits in the middle of that. And you know, these interlinked spaces of the ground and second floor, you know, support social interaction as its key motivator. It also allows for a huge amount of flexibility for various kinds of activities. There's study spaces and offices upstairs, and then the kind of party activity, meeting social space on the ground floor. And again, you know, concrete floors, super, super durable. They've been augmenting this building since the day it was built. And you know, the engineers, red. So red's a key idea in the project, and really the kind of ability for the building to engage its courtyard and be a really indoor-outdoor kind of place, so that their territory is not just the building, but it's the entire courtyard. So this is the Summerlin branch library, and the key drivers for this project, again, delivered in a very, very collaborative way, with both the community and the construction manager and our consultant team. It's intended to anchor and animate the street. If anybody's been to Summerlin before this building was done, you could like shoot a cannon down Main Street, which it sits on, and it's like nothing happening. So this has really brought people to the downtown area. It also is a very positive contributor to the community, and it also seeks to connect to its landscape setting. And you know, the building is like a super, super low budget. And what we did is we just created two neutral axes, which created 4 quadrants. So we have adults and children's, and then just on this neutral axis took TJIs, super cheap building material, and just rotated them. So this is, where's this thing? This is a high corner, and that's a high corner. If you can imagine, these are the low corners, and that's a low corner. So very, very dynamic building built like so simply. Once we kind of explained it to the contractor, showed them the model, oh, great, okay, we can do this. And then just, key things for libraries, ease of supervision, et cetera, all, everything being at the kind of heart. So, multi-use is really at the core of community buildings. This is a message for all of our community work that we do. The ability to be open, to be closed, to suit a really wide range of activities, and to be super, super flexible. So, good storage, movable furniture, all of the above. So when they have author readings, they open these doors, put all this furniture away, and then move all these stacks away in this whole space. Actually, I think it was the Whistler Public Library was one of the first that did that. It's brilliant. From a tectonic perspective, this is that TJIs that we were talking about. It's very very straightforward building, kind of a kit of parts approach. And it's a positive, very highly used community space. I think the key message for this project is from the day that Shelley and I went up to meet with them till the day we had the opening party was 15 months. And it's an 8,000 square foot building. We did that because we went up and spent 3 days, and we went from vision to an approved concept design before we left. So you have to be able to, you can't take your computer, you have to take felts and tracing paper and a scale and be prepared to work into the night while everybody else is at home sleeping, and then meet it again with what you're reflecting back to the community. But we do a lot of remote work, and that is the only way, because the project budgets just can't afford to fly you somewhere that's, costs thousands of dollars and takes a full day to get there. You have to go and spend the time there and get the work done and come. And it was so they're not going back and forth and taking months to get to this place. And it creates a certain kind of dynamism. The community really wanted this building to happen. They had a very supportive library organization behind them. And we got the construction manager was hired like the week after we were. So again, we were all on team paddling in the same direction. It can be done. So different scale. This is the Britannia Community Services Center Renewal. And for those of you who don't know, Britannia is an 18-acre site that sits behind Venables and behind Commercial Drive in the center of the city. It is currently home to 2 schools and about a 90,000 square foot community facility. The Renewal is approximately 300,000 square feet of community services center, or community facilities replacing that 90,000, and the 2 schools and approximately 300,000 square feet of housing. So our job was to work with the 5 partners, City, Vancouver School Board, Park Board, Vancouver Public Library, and the Britannia Community Services Society to create a unified vision and project goals, and then to go out to the community. This part took, 14 months of consultation. We met, we did 50 public engagements, actual activities where we went out and met with the community. And then through surveys and other methods, touched over another additional 3,000 people. It was a very fulsome engagement, and was a lot of work put into who is not at the table normally, who does not come out to public open houses. So we went and we met with a homeless group. We went and met with newcomer people. We went and met with the LGBT crowd. We went, anybody who, seniors, youth. We went and met with people, met them where they're at. What were sort of determined the vulnerable populations. But a key driver behind this is the project was done with an Indigenous lens. And actually we were very fortunate to gain Uri Scott out of that process, because we approached her to kind of help us lead some of that. And she ended up coming into working with us as a result. I can talk more if you'd like to hear more about what that is about, leading a project with an Indigenous lens. But the shared values that were created, and I think this is the key thing, people think it's sort of kind of superficial, but it isn't. This is so core to the success of this project, is creating these shared values, that we would take action on reconciliation. Like, the community really owns these points. Like, they really, really own it. That we would honor history and culture, prioritize sharing and caring, and be accessible, welcoming, and safe for all, support well-being and growth of the individual and community, and to optimize resilience and sustainability. And these are just some of the activities that we undertook here. So this is, we're leading an Indigenous consultation with primarily Indigenous participants, but other members of the community, to really dig down to what did it mean to, what were the Indigenous values that you might apply to this project. So, sorry, this is a hard diagram to read, but this is trying to explain to people what is a design process, what is a master plan. Vision, space needs, policies, urban design best practices, technical requirements, etc. Goes into the conceptual options bowl, mix it up, and get some community feedback from which you move to create a master plan. So to really have people understand what happens to all this stuff we've contributed to, and then and our feedback here, how do we get here? So we spent a lot of time just educating the public about what was a master plan, what wasn't a master plan. And ultimately for us, this is actually a diagram that we did to get the project. And it ended up being a very relevant diagram at the end, in terms of what are the layers of consideration that have to go into this project in terms of program, public realm, sustainability, the site conditions, and the site itself. So, and we just kept looping back through this, and a lot of work was done around doing the program for the facility, and understanding the public realm, and creating public urban design principles to guide future development of the site. So I'll just make this quick, but basically the project includes a very large aquatics facility with a gym, fitness, gymnastics, daycare, 69-kid daycare, and about 100 units of housing, a rink and about 100 units of housing, library, art gallery, childcare, about 100 units of housing, the social and cultural spaces of the community center, which will include a food center, which is a fairly significant thing, and because in the end of the day, food drives community, and any time Britannia has an event, they feed the community. There's performance space, art studios, elders and youth spaces, family place. It's all in this facility. And their carving center that they have has been relocated. And then, to create this common area, which I'll talk about in a minute a little more, the shops and classrooms that are here for the school are relocated under a playing field to bring a field up to be level with the elementary school. So some of the key principles here are to, capitalize on the topography, and to increase green space, and to activate the public realm. And in this drawing, you can see this is a drawing of actually the public realm itself, and with the common, and the Parker Greenway and the Napier Greenway being extended. And right now you cannot actually see through on any one of these like this is the old street grid really that we're bringing back. And there's been building kind of built in the middle of the streetway, et cetera. So the idea is to connect the building, the whole place back into the community, and extend Grandview Park through a playway into the common, and then out towards Woodland Park. So, connecting to community, creating a heart, and to extend the green network. And with putting all of the mass to the north, super simple sounding, allowed the sites to remain unshadowed and to also stay away from the kind of heritage context of the smaller houses, etc. And put all of this development up against the industrial zoning of Venables. And create the best roof deck in the city, because this is the grand view. So in ending, this is the last project I'm going to show you. This is some work that we're currently engaged in, doing the UVic Indigenous Legal Lodge, which is the first facility for an Indigenous law program in Canada. And so we've been working really intensively with students, faculty, staff, and elder advisors, Indigenous elder advisors, to establish the kind of framework, but from which the project, the kind of guiding principles from which the project will grow, quite literally. So this is grounded. The roots are the 4 purposes that UVic had established, that it was to be a space of convening, stimulating, researching, and sharing. And then the ground, this nurturing plane, is really, was created through our visioning process to talk about Indigenous law as living practice. And what it meant was to live the good life. And so out of that fertile soil will grow the guiding principles of the project. And again, oops, sorry, what did I, oh, I did what you said not to do. Can you do this? Like, what do I do? Sorry, everybody. I can talk about it. We can actually, has everybody seen that enough? We can talk about that. I mean, I just think it's a really good example of our kind of way of working and how important that work and how seriously we take it. Because we know that this project will be, like, in a way, the architecture part's easy. After this, you know, we've got great talent and skills in our office, knowledge, technical ability to deliver a great project, but this is the hard stuff. Really getting at other than yourself, like outside the office, moving out into community and finding some truth with that people can own. And I think it's kind of why we get out of bed in the morning. All right. So my advice about how to do all of this is just to stay curious and interested in people. All right, without further ado, it's my great honor to introduce Melissa Higgs, who I first met in 2000, which is now a little while ago, when she first arrived here from Calgary. I was very, very honored to have her be my mentee and to witness her growth into an exemplary architect. She is now a partner at HCMA. She helps run or maybe you do run the Tilt Labs, the project architect for the Grandview Heights Aquatic Center, an award-winning facility, many other projects. She's passionate and talented, and I consider her not only a fellow architectural seeker, but a dear friend.
Can you guys hear me? I feel like I'm yelling compared to Jennifer. Thank you for that incredible introduction. It's a joy to be here with Jennifer. I'm very honored. I'm happy to see so many people here to learn about Jennifer and Shelley's practice and their philosophy. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and I think for me, most specifically, sharing your approach and what's important to you and Shelley. I'm going to say just a couple things before I get into some of my questions. First of all, first-time moderator, so, you know, bear with me here. And I would like to tell a story about Jennifer, and it's not going to be quite as nice as... I just want to tell a quick story about the first time I met Jennifer. So, and I also want to clarify that I'm not from Calgary. I went to school in Calgary, so, you know, sorry for anyone out there who's from Calgary. Anyway, when I graduated, I came back from UOC, and I wasn't very familiar with... I didn't have a lot of connections in Vancouver. One of my design professors, Mark Britannia, who said, you absolutely must look up Jennifer. She should be your mentor. And so I sought Jennifer out. I sent her an email, I called her or something, and we arranged a meeting, and I confessed to being, fresh out of school, very nervous. I had my portfolio. I might even have had a letter because maybe I wanted a job too. I'm not sure. But, and I went, and Jennifer had a different office at the time on Water Street. So I go to her office, and I trek through all the hallways, and I'm kind of nervously find her office, and I open the door, and it's like one big corner office space, and I just want to reiterate, I'm already nervous. I open the door, and this like enormous dog, like a bull mastiff sized dog, or maybe even bigger, like lunges at me, like teeth bared, and it's literally on a chain, like an East Van size, like many thick links chained to a desk. The whole desk like shakes and rattles while this dog tries to eat me. I feel like I dropped my portfolio. I lost all my composure. Jennifer wasn't there. But I think the why this is an important story for me is it says so much to me about Jennifer. Like just the way the way she runs the practice, it was so unexpected. It was so memorable. And then when Jennifer eventually did kind of show up for our meeting, this enormous dog was docile and friendly and lovely. And this was a rescue dog. And Jennifer's like, we've just had him for her for a week. And, you know, she was absolutely had a heart of gold. So I think the connection for me is this, you know, Jennifer is a force. Like, she's really a force. But she also has this amazing heart. So it's been my honor to be her mentee. I still consider myself her mentee. Okay, and I think the format for tonight is I have about 15 or 20 minutes of Jennifer to myself with some questions, and then we're going to open it up to all the questions you guys have. So I'm a preparer, so I have some questions here. I think I had this question in advance, but it kind of resonates still from your presentation. I feel like participatory and inclusive design is really, we're very conscious of it, more so now, I think, and I know in the work that we do, but also in terms of our clients, it's something that it's a bit easier to navigate. It's still the hard work for sure, but it strikes me that you and Shelley we're kind of way ahead of the curve. Like, you've been doing this for a long time. You know, I'm going to use the word trailblazer. Like, you started such a long time ago. What was how did that start for you? And maybe it's like, how do you connect the dots from, was there like an aha moment about this is how we should practice, or how I want to practice, to kind of where you are now?
Well, I think we first realized that we needed to work in an inclusive, consultative way when we started. Can you hear me? Okay, if I just talk about this. When we started working with Indigenous communities, and hearing people, listening to people is core to success there. We had a couple of experiences where it didn't go so well. Rocking up for a 3-day workshop with the community, and after about 20 minutes, an elder standing up in the room and saying, it's really interesting who's not here. We might as well have packed up and gone home. So really understanding how important it is to design process to make sure the right people are in the room, that everybody's been kind of pre-consulted and, you know, the whole thing kind of constructed. Like that, the light went on for me big time, because it was so important. We went there so open-hearted, so wanting to hear, and just realizing that these things are also layered in politics and, you know, so many other layers that you kind of have to get smart to, and that are kind of hard and painful and maybe not that pleasant to think about. But if you can design that in, then it can be really successful. So I think we've learned overall. I was very honored. Actually worked with Kate Gerson, with Henry Hawthorne. I worked with Henry from 1980 on and off until I started my own architectural practice in 1988. So on and off, like I did a co-op program, and did several stints after graduation with Henry. And sadly, he died last year. I consider him a real mentor for me, and he had a very large focus in his practice working with First Nations, and so I learned kind of with him supporting a lot, and then that enabled us to start getting that work. And we have just learned a lot from about compassionate listening from Indigenous people, and about inclusivity and caring. That doesn't really, I mean, I think it's starting to resonate into non-Indigenous society, settler society, however you want to say it. But it really, there's a lot of wisdom there, and we all could learn a lot.
Maybe I just want to pick up a little bit, because it really stuck with me at the end when you said this is like this side of your kind of image there. That's the hard stuff, and I kind of live it sometimes too. It is the hard stuff, and you told a story that is kind of chilling. The standing up and the who isn't here. And those are difficult, vulnerable moments, right? Do you have like an opposite end of the spectrum story where there are those stories too where you connect with somebody and there's it makes a difference, like it makes a significant difference to maybe how you would have proceeded with a project or.
Well, the Britannia, I had a deposition of people come and ask me when I was moving to the community. It's generally pretty positive, and I think it's when you have the building opening and maybe when you go back and people have put the crap brick couches in and just taken over the project and own it, or when you have a client tell hear them telling people that they designed the building, wow, it's like you have so succeeded. That's the best success, that they can actually own the work. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does, but in a kind of, I'm trying to stay on track, but at least we did 2 other questions. I think the story about the furniture and the brick was it's funny and we laugh, but you're all a little bit heartbroken that the furniture shows up.
It makes taking pictures really hard.
But the bigger question I had was, your kind of 4-petal diagram where you'd added culture, so you have the financial, the environmental, the social, and the cultural. That furniture story in the lobby is a little bit cultural, a little bit social, and I'm kind of wondering, there's a kind of a struggle to measure whether you've had impact after the fact. Like, how do you capture social? It's kind of easier to kind of track the metrics around environmental, if you came in on a budget. Do you and Shelley and your team, do you try to find ways to kind of capture the fact that you've had that social impact, or how do you guys feel about that?
I don't know that we go back and measure that per se, but I think, again, it's like people owning the building, people really engaging and using the building deeply, having people, I mean, the story of Radium, they've rented it out for 2 years already. So yes, it's economic, but that's actually an endorsement that people love the building. And so that's as a result of it being actually a great place, but that it's right fit too to them. We spent a lot of time figuring out what that meant with them, and I don't know how to say that differently, but I think it's really about the success that you have when the project's all said and done. And these buildings take forever to put together, and we're a small practice. We don't have a huge portfolio of built work. We have a lot of little stuff, renovations and that kind of thing. But our number of very large built buildings is kind of in here, right? So the chances to check on that, but we do check in, and it's always, of course, when you get them to be a reference for you.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the flip side of going deep with the community, is that it's hard to leave the community, especially for the projects you're doing, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I have a quote. It's a quote from an icon, Jane Jacobs. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created for everybody. This is a quote from 1961. We're here in almost 2020, and I had a challenge question for Jennifer around, a couple questions around that. But do you have an urban arts quote? Like, what would either you or you and Shelley, if you could kind of, what would your quote be?
Communities are us.
You had said working in and with the community, so maybe it's something around.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the same thing. That's just a cheeky way of saying the same thing. I mean, we really did, in the very, very beginning, decide that we were going to dedicate ourselves to community work as opposed to magazine work or anything else. It's not to say that we'd be unhappy if our projects were in a magazine, but we're not driven by that motivator or by an economic driver, because we would do different kind of work. But we really, really get out of bed in the morning for the community. We get a lot. It's so much fun to work with people and to feel like you're changing lives. I mean, we think we really do actually create positive impact in the communities we work in.
Absolutely. Maybe a related question to the quote, and you've mentioned the idea that a source of pride for you would be if the community said they had designed the building. Mm-hmm. I think there's potentially a fear maybe in the architectural profession that engagement or results to it designed by consensus as opposed to perhaps designed by collaboration. How would you?
I think it puts you in the driver's seat, really, because if you're coming in from out here with your ideas and making a building, like, it might be a nice looking building and it might work well. It might work well, like you might have guessed right, but it won't necessarily be what the community really needs. And we don't ask our clients to design the buildings or just to tell us. We really try to stay away from, any kind of descriptor around the building must look like an Italian villa, whatever. I mean, there's no kind of, picture given. We have been given pictures. We want this, we want the building to look like this. But the skill is actually what is that? What is it about that speaks to you? Because you have an opportunity, we always explain to our clients, to have something that's truly tailor-made for you. So we try to have of course, there's a kind of a flavor through the work where, we have a kind of a hand in the work but each project is truly kind of tailor-made for the client with our kind of perspective, I guess.
Great. This is kind of just a fun question. What is the biggest mistake you've made professionally? Well, you can answer it either way, but let's start with professionally.
That was good. You had a different thing on there. That was actually, what was the best mistake? Well, I actually thought that I would live in New York. I came back here. That was the greatest mistake ever. I mean, I'm from here. My people are from here. But I did my grad degree in New York, and it really is a place that speaks to me. So I thought that I would have a big urban life, and instead I have a small urban life in a great way. And we've actually, my partner and I, my nighttime partner, who's over there, have recently partially emigrated to the Sunshine Coast. So we're kind of even less urban.
Awesome.
Ex-urban.
This is an off-the-cuff question, but I'm wondering how many hours a year you travel.
Oh, it's really...
In BC, or that's potentially...
It's way less this year. It's been way better. But some years it's like we have projects that are places like Lower Post. Does anybody here know where Lower Post is? Right. It's 20 miles from the Yukon border. You get there by flying to Whitehorse and driving 5 hours across the top of the world in various weather. So, we're trying, both Shelley and I are trying to have other lovely people do those trips. But we've been having some great successes here in the city, doing some fairly significant projects, which you guys will find out about in the not too distant future.
Exciting. I have more questions, but I feel like what I should do is open it up to this amazing audience. So, actually, do I stay here? Is that what we decided? Yeah. Questions? Don't be shy. Kate.
I have a question about your partnership. Your partner's not here today, but I just wanted to know about how you met.
Okay, I think they want you to actually talk into the mic so they can record your question. So,
sorry, that was my job.
Hi. No, it's okay. So my question is about your partnership. How you met and how you knew that that's who you wanted to work with, and then looking back now, that collaboration. What you see are the kind of strengths for coming from both sides, and what would make a good partner? Thank you.
Okay, I will do my best. So Shelley and I actually met at the University of Waterloo. She is much older, at 4 months. She's much older than me. So she is which I always remind her of. She was in the class ahead of me, and she was she was the cool girl. And so I knew who she was. She did not know who I was. But in 1985, after she and I both went away and left Waterloo and went and did grad degrees, she rocked up. I was actually sitting at the reception desk trying to figure out how to use the computer at Jim Chang's because I wanted to change something. And she rocked up and was looking for a job. And so it was like, hey, you're Shelley Craig. Hey, you're Jennifer Marshall. So 1985, I think for me, I had returned from Columbia. I am not architecturally from here. I had done work terms, but I did not go to school here. So I didn't have a posse of people. Everybody I knew were sort of older in practice. And so she and I became really fast friends at that point. We had our daughters 2 days apart in adjoining rooms at the hospital, not planned. I mean, we are tight, close friends. And then after I left my first partnership, which I did for 13 years with Marshall Fisher Architects, Bill Fisher, I did a little practice from home, working on a variety of different projects. And Shelley and I collaborated during that time, and we did a lot of talking about, should we do it? Should we not? We knew we could be successful together working-wise. We think about things in the same way. We have our same value system. And we went, when we decided we were going to be partners, we went to the VAG Cafe and wrote our articles of business. Number 1, stay friends. 2, have fun. 3, make some money. And we still have that little napkin. Yeah. So does that answer your question? Ish? Oh, you wanted to know something about now. I think it's really important to continue the dialogue with whoever you're in a relationship with. I mean, that's a kind of a broad thing, but I think particularly in a partnership, when you start getting really busy, like we're really busy and we don't always see each other, it's kind of hi Fred, bye Fred, to really make time to talk and to just both at the sort of friend level, but at the business level. And it's pretty easy for us because we know each other so well. I can tell by the tone of her voice that I have to talk to her about something, you know. And it's also that kind of, we have a fairly intuitive relationship. You should ask these guys what it's like. I mean, it was probably horrible.
We'll talk later at SALT, right? I just want to build on that question a little bit. What made you decide that you wanted to have your own practice? So when was it right for you?
Oh, well, I was working for Henry, right, Kate? And I got pregnant. And Henry's a 3-pack-a-day man, so I'm not going to work for him because he smokes. And I got offered a job teaching part-time at the university, so I just decided, actually with Bill, who used to work at Henry's, that we got a little project up at Whistler that it was time. Like I literally got, because I was pregnant, I couldn't imagine anybody actually employing a mother. That was really where we were at in 1988. So I had to start my own firm.
How many mothers do you have in your firm now?
2, right? 3, well, Shelley and I. 3, and then we have a father. So there's 5 of us. 5 parents. Shelley and I are still mothering.
Yeah, you counted yourselves in that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
That's right, isn't that right, you guys? Yeah, okay. Kate? 1 father, that's right.
Oh, do you have the mic, Kate?
Hello? Lots of questions, but being women in architecture, we have to ask, of course, about the fact that you're women, and how do you feel that contributes to your practice? What challenges have you faced? How has it changed over the years, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's gotten easier to be women in architecture, in the sense that there are more women in architecture. It's a more open place for women. There's certainly been a lot of more dialogue. People are, municipalities and governments have made a huge inroads around gender equity and really pushing that agenda. So it's made it easier, I think, for our profession, because we kind of look shabby next to what people like the city are doing around gender equity. I think there's still, this is my little honest moment. I think that there's still a glass ceiling, that if they have a male-led practice and a female-led practice, and you're equal in your accomplishments, like if you could sort of equate your portfolios, they'll give it to the guy. They're taking less risk. I think that's how people think. People hire people who look like them. I lean in, what can I say? So I would say, and for Shelley and I, we had a really strong gender equity hiring practice, and then Hillary happened. She didn't get elected, and we just said, okay, gloves are off. We're just going to hire the best person. So we have 2 men and 9 women in the practice. So we hire people who look like us. But, I always say, if you want to get something done, you ask a mother to do it.
So that made me laugh, but I was remembering a time where we went for one of our regular required check-ins, which usually did like some business at the very beginning that took the paperwork out, and then it was like, how's your love life, how's whatever else going on, and I remember saying, and I probably just started at HCMA, which is now more than 50% women, which is awesome, and I kind of said to Jennifer, almost like in a kind of friend-to-friend sort of way, well, like the guys all go out for lunch, and they don't stop on my desk and ask me to go with them, and it wasn't like, and I remember Jennifer just saying at the time, it's a similar thing to people hiring who they hire. It was just like she said, they just don't think of it. They're not excluding you necessarily. They're just like going to get their thing. And I find actually sometimes the reverse is true. It's an interesting, I'm not sure my point is really, except that it's kind of, maybe it's human nature, maybe it's human behavior. But it was just really good advice, because I was feeling a bit like, do I have to do something about this? Should I go over and invite myself to lunch? How do I do this? And over time it just, there were just more women, and it just became easier. But when you're the only woman being invited out, it's just harder somehow, right? But it's interesting how much it's changed in not that long time. But I would love other questions. This is a huge audience. I'm sure you must be curious about things in terms of Jennifer and Shelley's practice. Can you just hang on a second till we've got a third row question.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the great presentation. I have a question regarding for your presentation. So impressed about how you're passionate working with the community. Would you be able to share more about how you manage to work with so many different voices from the user group, stakeholders, and then how do you manage to keep the client happy at the same time? Because usually a lot of time the voice from the community can be really intensive and tough for our design process.
Well, like for instance, Britannia, where we had many voices. The city was, and their partners, were very invested in the project being successful, and they understood that alignment in the community was it was the ground on which this project was going to be built. So they really were looking for us. They were actually kept being so worried about the community, and we went out and had a great time in the community. The community responded really open-heartedly, and I think if you just frame the project really clearly, like it's not like, oh, whatever you want, we're here to hear everything you want. I mean, it's like, okay, here's the project. It's framed in this way. We're looking for you to give us input on these subjects, and here's the goals that we've established together already. Here's our value system that you've bought into. Then you can kind of frame conversations, and it's always a loop back. Like we don't go out to the community, get this huge thing of all the wish list and come back to the client and dump it. It's like, the client's part of it, but you loop back. Okay, we've heard this. What is our response going to be back? Making sure that you're always checking. It's that looping process, and it is time consuming, and you have to be really organized. And you have to be able to be. My most challenging work is thinking about what questions. Uri and I had a big long drive today, and we have a vision workshop we have to do next week, and it's like, what are the questions we have to ask? What do we need to know? And that's really hard sometimes to do at the beginning of a project. Like at the core level, how are we going to get values established? So that's very creative work. It's not architecture per se, but it's root to what we do.
Can I just pick up a little bit on that conversation? Because one of my questions I'd written down was, what are the key questions you use to get to the vision? And so can you just talk a little bit maybe more about that conversation that you and Yuri had? Because it is the really critical part, I think. Okay, well, this is a fairly significant Indigenous project for an Indigenous client in the city. And we were just trying to understand, like, what did we need to know to be able to have that kind of guiding principles in place? So, what was their approach to indigeneity? What did that mean to them? What protocols and processes did they need to have in place to feel like they were making good decisions? What did livability look like? Just kind of, that's just a few of them, but like we kind of frame that in a kind of structure and then do it in edible bites and create process around how you're going to ask those questions. Yeah, and like you said, that's specific for every project, and that is the creative work. Yeah, there's a woman here. Can I pass this?
Perhaps related to that, I'll come back to one of the points you made in your presentation, and you said how to look at a project from an Indigenous eye, lens.
Lens, right. Oh, the Britannia thing. So the city is and all its partners are delivering on their commitment to reconciliation. The city of Vancouver decided not to be the year of reconciliation. They decided to be the city of reconciliation. So they have undertaken that as a kind of an oath to their practice, and it's across all of everything that they're doing at the city. So this project was one of the first projects to have that as a kind of a mandate, but nobody really knew what that meant. How would you do that? What did that mean? And to us, it's really about getting at the core values and the goals. Like what makes an inclusive place? How does an urban Indigenous person, this is a question for Britannia, how does an urban Indigenous person in the city of Vancouver feel welcome? What are the barriers to feeling welcome? What are, like just really trying to understand that perspective, and then to create values around that. And what's really interesting about it is, Shelley has pointed out numerous times, well, those are human values. But they aren't the values. That's why I was saying that revolutionary part about people in the middle. Indigenous communities, Indigenous people do that as their core value. We don't really. About, how we do our business. People are really not the very center. Yes, they're kind of somebody you have to serve, etc. But really so what we've learned is that those Indigenous values are we have a lot to learn from them, but also they're very human values, and nobody went, oh my God, we have to be, have more green space. We want to connect to nature. Oh, everybody goes, huh, yeah, right, of course we do, right? But they put it in a different way where it's like core to being to success. So that's a kind of a gross generalization. I'm probably doing a terrible job, and Uri's probably ashamed of me. But those are the kind of conversations we have a lot around the projects in the office.
Another question.
So you talk about coming up with these values and coming up with the kind of image that's still on the screen as the hard part. But to me, that's the easy part, and getting the building to really express and embody those values is, to me, the hard part, and that's the architecture of it.
That's what we know how to do, though. We were trained to do that, right? We're not like that's what we do. That's who we are, right? We know how to do that in a. I think that's like it's not to say that any of it's easy. I mean, architecture is a challenging profession, but for us, this is really where, if we get this right, everything just flows. And then you have a kind of a matrix or a check-in place that you can bring these ideas back to and say, well, how does that fit? Like this kind of wacky idea that you might have, or is it just some kind of wankerish, out there idea that's really a kind of a magazine idea, And that's, I think it's frustrating for staff because we're always like forcing that point of view, like in terms of, might be a really cool idea, but is it really what we're trying to achieve here? So.
Susan, the third row here.
Sorry, hi.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you already had the mic.
And then Susan.
Thanks, Jennifer, for the presentation tonight. And as you said, that you always grew up and you were from New York, and
no, I'm
you were and you lived in New York, you worked in New York, and you were a very urban girl. And I believe an urban girl desires to work on urban architectural projects. And no. But that world and this world, I feel that it's completely different. So I was wondering, how do you strike a balance? How do you stay motivated? What brought you here to do these projects?
Well, we're super lucky to be here because, Ken Frampton was one of my educators at Columbia, and I saw him probably, I don't know, I've been back here for 5 or maybe Bill and I had started our practice already. So I'm like building stuff. And he said, like, New York, all anybody can do is renovate a store or a restaurant. Like, they're not building anything. I mean, that's a bit different now because people are building in New York, but this is the frontier, man. Like, there is so much, like, this place is on fire now. There's so much on, there's a lot of work here. And this is my hometown. This is the place I know. I wouldn't say I have connections here because I'm not that, that's not my kind of thing. I know a lot of people in the city. My biggest connections actually in the profession are I was the office boy at Thompson Burke Pratt and Partners in 1975. I graduated from high school and decided that university was for stupid people. So I would do I was going to apprentice to be an architect and live a real life. A year as the office boy cured me. And I quickly went off to university. But then there was 178 employees at TBMP, and principals of many of the firms in Vancouver were juniors in the office at that time. So it was a great way for me to kind of connect into, the architectural world for future employment and all of that kind of stuff. And I encourage you guys to build your networks with your colleagues and out there. People are always interested in connecting. Susan, do you have a question?
There you go. It's a okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I really enjoyed your presentation. I think to me, you kind of make it look easy. It's like you seem to know what you wanted to do. You figured out you didn't need to go to school before you went to school. And I think sometimes the experience of architecture as a career for women, I think, is different for men. And I think the road is not necessarily as straight as maybe it seems. And your road looks pretty straight to me. But I'm wondering if you ever hit a fork in the road. And the fork can come at, I think, different moments for different people. But for women, I think there's multiple places where the road forks. And did you hit it? And if you did, maybe what got you through that fork, or what drew you back to the career that you have?
Well, I think, a lot of us have had the challenge of, realizing you're going to be a mother, and, that wasn't really in the plan. And certainly wasn't in the professional development plan, and sort of the kinds of, it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to become a partner in a firm, someone else's firm. That trajectory was over the moment I became pregnant, because in my day, this was not an option. I wanted to be able to be a caregiver to my children, and I was able to be master of my own destiny for that reason. So that's a fork in the road. Deciding to leave Waterloo and not knowing why, not why, but where I was going to go. I spent 3 years sort of navel gazing, working in the profession. Waterloo is a great program because it's co-op, and so I left there already with having 4 years of working experience under my belt, and so I was easily employed. BCIT helped too. So I guess it's been fairly. I decided in grade 5 I was going to be an architect. I didn't really have another plan. If it hadn't worked out, I don't know what I would have done. It's just that was my plan, and so I don't have a lot of creativity when it comes to that, options. So Arthur Erickson changed my life. I looked over the fence, and he was doing a project, and I realized that architecture you can transform the world with the built art.
Can I have a really quick show of hands for people who are either architects or on their way to being architects? Who knew really early that they wanted to be an architect? Maybe not grade 5, but did you just always know? No, I thought it was going to be more. Great. Thank you. I think, Ellie, you had a question next. Did you? Oh, microphone is behind. Oh, here we go.
What's next for Urban Arts, and what have you not done that you want to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're about to start doing some large multi-use residential urban projects. That's a big thing for us. We are growing the practice. So we have associates, and we are working on succession. So that's all happening. We're definitely growing the practice. So anybody looking for work, come and talk to us. Yeah, I think that's what's next for Urban Arts. We don't really want to be a massive firm. We're not looking to be, probably more than 20 people. But the work that we're doing is probably requiring that we go there. We've been small for a really long time, and it's like family. We used to say we're not going to have any more people than we can have around a table for lunch. So far we're kind of at the edge of that, eh? We do lunch club, and that's tough. Christmas was hard to find a table for us to actually be together at. So it's really tricky, because you turn into it. And what that says is you turn into a different kind of office where maybe you don't, we're sort of a family right now, and everybody kind of knows each other, and that might really change when we get bigger, and we're kind of a little terrified about that. Yeah. Oh, you mean practice-wise? Oh, well, I think the multi. Use residential stuff is new. I mean, I did a lot of that before I started Urban Arts Architecture. Before, when all my employment was for people like Jim Chang, so we did a lot of high-rise development. So I've been there, but to do it ourselves is a big deal.
I think we have time for one more question, and I feel like there was a hand. Sorry if I don't get it right. Sorry, you've got the microphone already. You're set.
Oh,
Please
no worries.
Go.
It's all good. I really like your presentation about, instilling values inside of community and all that good stuff. And it's very applicable to community centers. But I currently work in an architecture firm that does mixed-use residential, where the client isn't necessarily making a high priority of community, and profit is definitely the highest priority. So my question to you is, what recommendations do you have for architects working in projects where profit is the big driver, and how can you start to move the buck in that regard?
Really hard, because we decided not to do that kind of work. Made a deliberate decision about that. And we did try at the beginning, kind of going out to meeting with developers and everything. We just realized there was kind of, like, we just weren't speaking the same language. So I think that's actually a bit of a clue, is figure out what their language is and speak to them in it. And I mean, somebody like Bjarke Ingels is a great way to kind of see about how do you can convince people of some incredible things if you kind of figure out how to what are their buttons, what are the key things you need to kind of address. And having creativity around that. It's tricky though, because people who are getting in, getting out, we generally work for owner occupiers, right? People who care in the long term. They're not flipping the project. And I think that's actually a problem we have in the city, because people don't care about the city when they're developing that way. I mean, it takes an extraordinary individual. And it's not to say there aren't great developers in the city, but I think that's actually fundamentally at the root, because they're not going to live with the consequences of what happens, other than their reputation down the line. So, and that's not to say there aren't fabulous developers. That's not, but I think you have to try to seek out those people that you can be effective with. But there's community in everything, like the lobby of the building's a community space.
Ashley, you're going to come up? Sure. Can I just say thank you to Jennifer myself?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. That was a real honor. It was wonderful being up here with you. Thanks for sharing your work.
Thank you, Melissa.
Can we please give Jennifer and Melissa a big round of applause? Thank you so much for being here tonight. And also to Inform Interiors again for hosting. We really, really appreciate it. Jennifer, thank you for the great presentation. I think we all were inspired by your approach to inclusivity and community and how you integrate that into your practice. So thank you very much. And Melissa, for your very insightful questions. It's refreshing to see, mentee-mentor relationship still going strong after all these years. So thank you again.
I feel incredibly blessed that Melissa knocked on my door. So it's been a very fruitful relationship for me. I want to be Melissa when I grow up. It was
all really good.
Well, thank you both so much for being here tonight. As a small token of our appreciation, thanks again for coming out tonight to Inform. And thank you to the audience for all of your great questions. We are going to head over to Salt Tasting Room in about 10 minutes if anyone would like to join us for another glass of wine and some more questions. If you have any lingering, burning questions for our guests tonight, please join us. And also, one more thing, stay tuned for our next event. It's a tour of the Vancouver Public Library, which will be, I think, on February 21st. Yes, February 21st. And if you haven't signed up for your learning units, please do so on your way out. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Oh, did we get learning units?